When we left off, Constellation got attacked by a Starborn calling himself the Hunter. Sam died in the battle and the members of Constellation gathered to mourn the loss. Here's the thing about killing a character in a story. It's important to make the actual death impactful, which they already screwed up by having it happen off screen to a character I don't really care about, but what's more important is making their loss impactful. The writers need to show you how it affects the other characters that they had a relationship with. Seeing their loved ones process their deaths really brings meaning to that death by showing what the impact is. In video games, it's important to make sure that the player feels that loss too. And this is part of the problem with making the main characters do everything all the time. Why should I care about Sam's death? I had no attachment to him as a character, and he isn't even an essential part of Constellation. All he did was help me find one rock that I probably could have found without him. And don't give me any of that if I saw a stranger die, I would feel sad nonsense I got on the Demon Slayer video. Sam isn't real. If you want me to care about the death of a person that never existed in the first place, you have to make me care about them. Give me a relationship with them that I'm going to miss being a part of. Show me their relationship with other characters and how they're going to deal with the loss of someone important to them. Make them an essential part of the story that I'm now going to feel the loss of. So how does Bethesda handle this? Well, I already didn't care about Sam, so that's a knock against the impact of his death from the get-go. Sam doesn't play an integral role in Constellation, so there's no job he was doing that I'm going to feel the impact of losing. Imagine if Vlad died instead. I don't care that much about Vlad as a character, but I do like him, and Vlad fulfills a super important role in Constellation. He seems to be the only one that knows how to operate the Eye, which allows us to find the rocks all over the galaxy. I've already worked with Vlad to find a ton of these things. What if he died and we lost that expertise? That's something that I, as the player, would feel the effects of. What if Vlad died and suddenly it became much harder to find rocks? Then I could spend the entire game missing him and wishing I had his help. It could also be an interesting story development where the rest of Constellation now has to step up and fill in the gaps of that loss. We could come together and work together like never before to complete the job Vlad can't finish anymore. Or what if Walter died? Walter is funding Constellation. What if all of a sudden we had to wrestle with financial trouble? We'd have to keep searching for the rocks while also working hard to stay afloat, making the search much more difficult. Those deaths could affect the story and the gameplay, so the player feels the effects of that loss as well. I felt no grief over Sam's death because Sam was never a character I grew to care about, and because Sam fulfilled no role that will be missed. But even though Bethesda screwed up Sam's death, it's still possible to make it have weight by how the aftermath is handled. How does everyone else handle that loss? How will Constellation move forward in the wake of his death? During the funeral, I got the chance to speak on Sam's behalf, listen to some speeches, talk one-on-one with everyone, but the way they all talk about it, they speak in such generic terms. No one actually talks about Sam, they all talk broadly about the concept of death and loss. No one shares memories about Sam or things they're going to miss about him. They just wax poetic about whether or not there's an afterlife and how hard it is to deal with the pain of loss. I get that losing someone makes you think about these things, but what about Sam? Sam was more than just the day he died, at least he's supposed to be. There has to be more to him than that. These people worked with him for years and all they can say is, yeah, sure does suck that he died. Pour one out for my boy. The only people who seem to remember that we're here for Sam are his family. Talking to his dad is the only time I felt anything close to grief.
My boy.
I thought maybe I would come up with
I've lost my boy.
But
And let's not forget, Sam has a daughter. Sam is a parent. Do you realize how effectively you can appeal to people's emotions by showing them how a child processes their parent's death? Cora is Bethesda's golden ticket to ripping your heart out. So how'd they handle that?
Is this supposed to make everything okay? Make everyone feel better?
Well, for starters, Cora sounds completely disconnected from her dad's death. I mean, everyone handles grief differently. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's more about the grand total of her grief. What's it going to look like when she snaps back to reality and breaks down? How am I going to help her get through that? How is she going to remember her dad and choose to move forward? Well, I'd love to be able to answer those questions, but unfortunately, Sam's ex-wife shows up to take Cora out of the story entirely, and I never saw her again after the funeral. Oh, I'm mad now. You gave yourself the golden snitch of writing death in a story. You gave yourself the one-way ticket to Sob City, and then you threw it away. You wrote it out. How can you be this incompetent? I'm baffled. I'm awestruck. How did you not see how fucking stupid this is? This could have been so strong. Imagine the weight of this story where you have to help Cora deal with her grief, where you have to help her come to terms with reality. We already saw her blame me for his death. Imagine the guilt you could instill in me by playing to that. But no! You wrote her out! You wrote the strongest possible reason for me to care about Sam's death out of the goddamn story. What is wrong with you? Why would you do that? If you couldn't make me care about Sam when he was alive, then you could have at least made me care about him after he died, but you can't even handle that! Well, since the story doesn't care about Sam's maggot-infested corpse, then I don't see why I should dwell on it. This sucks. This is shit. And I'm done talking about it. Back when Sam got domed, we were being pursued by a Starborn called the Hunter. Before he left, he mentioned that if I keep collecting the rocks, I may be able to grasp the Unity. This meant nothing to me, but Mateo seems to have made a connection. Oh look, a character bringing something useful to the table that might help me. If only Sam did that. Ever. Mateo explains that the Unity is an important concept in his religion, the Sanctum Universum. We go to speak with the head priest, and it's worth noting here that I am a universal as well. It's one of the traits I picked up at the very beginning, being raised universal. So there's some unique dialogue that I can choose here as a part of that trait, but there's kind of an issue with it, as there is with seemingly everything in this travesty of a video game. More often than not, if there is optional or additional dialogue in this game, it doesn't do anything. I have one line of raised universal dialogue here, but all it does is advance the conversation the same way that any of the other lines I could have chosen do. So what's the point of even having that option? Well, it could be used to offer some additional world building that you don't get without it, but no, it doesn't do anything like that either. It serves no real purpose other than to signal to the player that they sure did choose that perk at some point. This isn't true all the time, and I'll give credit to Bethesda for that. Using wanted trait dialogue, I was able to make a persuasion easier during a bank robbery and skip persuasion altogether with the commander back during the Crimson Fleet. So there are times that this additional dialogue serves a purpose, but it's few and far between. Generally, it's meaningless fluff lines. The real issue comes in when you have a companion with you. I almost missed this entirely because I never had companions, and the few times I did, it was required. So the dialogue was written with the knowledge that whatever character I was with was there. Except for one time. Back when I met with the Collector. I had assumed at the time that Barrett always joins you for this mission, but I found out through research that I was wrong. You are required to have a companion with you for this mission, but it can be any of the companions from Constellation. I think it chooses whichever character you have the highest affinity with, which is how I ended up with Barrett. The fact that the game couldn't know which companion I would have with me made something really stick out. Sometimes your companions chime in during dialogue, but unless the game knows they're going to be there, anything they say will just get ignored by whoever you're talking to.
I would hate to sour our new friendship by becoming the victim of piracy.
We're not pirates, Petrov. We're explorers who might do a bit of piracy on the side as a hobby sometimes.
This awkward fluff dialogue was included because Bethesda knows it would be a little weird if they never said anything, but they didn't bother to account for all the possible characters or lines that might pop up, so they all just get ignored all the time, and it just completely interrupts the already broken flow of conversation.
Oh God, the captain's gonna love you. Just what I need. 2 blowhards.
Hello. Excuse me. 3 blowhards.
Go on then.
As a side note, this also offers a second explanation for why I couldn't get Barrett to distract the Collector while I grabbed the rock. The first reason is the aforementioned requirement of you getting a bounty, but the second reason is that Bethesda couldn't know that Barrett would be there instead of one of the other companions, so they just pretended he wasn't there at all. This is just the lowest bar of including companions in missions. Again, we have a situation where instead of catering to multiple playstyles and choices, Bethesda designed one way this could play out and found a way to invalidate the player's choices entirely, which is just bad. We talked to the priest about Unity, and he revealed that it's more than just a religious concept. It links to an old story about a pilgrim who found the true meaning of Unity. He gave each of the 3 major religions part of the truth defining it. After speaking with members of each of them, we discovered the coordinates to a location on a planet that the pilgrim left behind. I read the pilgrim's journals as I looked for answers. He seemed to be a religious scholar, as interested in the idea of a higher power as much as he was science. It's clear that he had followers, though he didn't seek them, they seeked him. He wished to be left alone to do his research, yet he also felt he needed people around him to give his work meaning. He also kind of seemed to be going crazy by the end. He may have been Starborn, I'm not entirely sure. His last piece of writing pointed me to another location. Once there, I found creatures seemingly lined up to lead me to an ancient structure. After playing with a beam of light for a bit, I accidentally solved whatever I was trying to do that I still don't fully understand, and suddenly I knew of another location that I needed to jump to. I got in my ship, jumped to the location, and found something surprising. I don't really know why, but the location I found led to the Hunter. He invited me aboard his ship. Finally, it was time to meet him face to face and speak with him, excluding that other time that I talked to him that he will never acknowledge. I mean, come on, one line about having met me on New Atlantis would have sufficed. Once on board, I met not only the Hunter, but also the Emissary. He's the Starborn that I met with Walter on Neon, the one that told me I should stop searching for the rocks. We at Constellation have thought of the Starborn as a collective group, but it turns out they're individuals with their own intentions. The Emissary and the Hunter are not on the same side, but they know each other, and they were having a meeting when I arrived. Now that I can finally meet with them, it's time to get some answers about the Unity, although it isn't quite what I expected.
The Unity. You are on the path to it. It is a place, a gateway. It is where we were reborn.
So, I gotta say, this part is more awkward than I thought. Hiding my face was way easier.
The Emissary is Sam, or at least a version of Sam. He explains that collecting all the funny rocks leads to the center of the universe, the Unity, which opens a doorway into an infinite number of universes. The Emissary is a version of Sam that reached the Unity and became Starborn, and since then, he's been to hundreds of parallel universes. Now he's in mine. In every universe, the Starborn fight over the rocks, because with each new universe, they gain access to new powers like the ones I have now. And the innocents of those universes suffer the consequences of their battles, like what happened in New Atlantis. It's a never-ending hunt for more rocks, more power, and more universes. The Hunter and the Emissary represent opposing ideologies when it comes to handling the rocks. The Emissary believes that the power granted by the rocks is too powerful for just anyone to have them. He believes someone needs to decide who gets access to that power, and he intends to be that person. He wants to organize the Starborn and the hunt for the rocks. The Hunter, on the other hand, believes that anyone strong enough to get their hands on the rocks and reach Unity deserves their power. He wants the Starborn to fight over the rocks. He revels in the chaos and violence. The Hunter reveals that he's the priest that helped me out, but again, it's just a parallel version from another universe. The problem I have with this is that the Hunter is a completely different person compared to the priest. The priest is a holy man who believes in appreciating the universe you have, while the Hunter is a violent killer hell-bent on his search for power. Where's the connection there? What does knowing that they're the same person do from a writing perspective? Okay, so the goal is to show that each parallel universe can be very different from my own, so different that the priest from another universe is a different person entirely, but that's just not very interesting, is it? I'm curious about how the priest became the Hunter. I want to have that discussion with him. I want to find out how his universe differed from mine, and what about that difference caused him to become the Hunter. What event happened there that didn't happen here? What pushed him down this path? That could make you stop and think about the events in your life that caused you to be the person that you are. It could pose the question of how different you could be if things were just a little different. But I don't get to have that discussion. That interesting idea is sidelined to show how different a parallel universe can be without explaining the actual difference. The Emissary, on the other hand, does share some insight. He explains that in his universe, I died to the Hunter, and he went on to finish collecting the rocks. So this says to me that his universe can't be that different from mine. In his universe, Constellation existed, and they were looking for the rocks the way they are here. The only difference in the order of events is who died. But you know what he doesn't mention? You know what he never brings up? Not even once? His daughter, Cora. I don't even know if Cora existed in his universe, because just like with the Hunter, I don't get to ask interesting questions like that. I don't get to find out how Sam became the Emissary. The Sam I knew left his home planet because he didn't want to govern Aquila, and if the Emissary was also a member of Constellation, that's what happened to him too. So how did Sam go from not wanting to be a leader to wanting to govern an order of Starborn that organizes the power granted by the Unity? What events changed Sam into the Emissary? Let me make one thing perfectly clear. The Emissary is not Sam. And I don't mean in a metaphysical sense where he's not the Sam I knew. I mean the Emissary is not Sam. He's the Emissary. And this is also where I reveal that Sam didn't have to die. During the battle with the Hunter, the character that dies is the companion that you had the highest affinity with, depending on whether you chose to stay at HQ or go to the Eye. When I played that mission, I loaded a save and did it again to see if my choice would influence those events, and I found out that if I had gone straight to the Eye, Barrett would have died. Initially, I thought it was a choice between Sam or Barrett, but I found out through research that it can be any of the four companions: Sam, Barrett, Sarah, or Andrasia. It's hard to confirm this because there's 3 Starfield wikis and all of them are incomplete or have wrong information because no one cares about this stupid game, but I believe the game assigns the companion you are closest to come with you to collect the rock from the collector. then puts the other 3 on the eye. For me, this was Barrett. Then when the hunter attacks, the game kills the companion you're closest to in the location that you abandon, either the one that stays at HQ or one of the 3 that is on the eye, whoever you're closest to. In my case, Sam. Then whoever dies becomes the emissary. If I had gone straight to the eye, my emissary would have Barrett's face. This is what I mean when I say that the emissary is not Sam. This is some weird quantum choice with an indirect cause and effect. When you first meet the emissary at Neon, they're nobody. They're just the emissary. Whoever they end up as hasn't been decided yet. Then you battle the hunter and the emissary becomes whoever died. Sam, Barrett, Sarah, or Andrasia. The emissary has no story or background of their own until you fill that in for them. Until someone in this universe dies, the emissary is nobody. And this is terrible for a mountain of reasons. On paper, it sounds great. Bethesda kills the person you're closest to, and in theory, that means that death will hurt more because you spent more time with them. In other words, they're being kind of lazy. They didn't bother writing a specific character whose loss would hurt and have meaning. They found a way to figure out which character's your favorite and killed them, because why wouldn't you be sad losing your favorite? They just didn't count on an introvert like me caring about none of them. I don't know how Sam ended up being the companion I was closest to. I probably just chose more dialogue options that he liked during the short time I was with him. I wrote an entire section where I talked about how Sam is the least interesting character, so the fact that he died for me was more or less just a weird coincidence. This also explains why the funeral is so awkward. No one besides his family wants to talk about Sam specifically because it might not have been Sam that died. They need to speak vaguely about the concept of loss because it could have been any of 4 different characters. This is unbelievably lazy. They couldn't be bothered to write 4 different funerals for the different paths you might go down, so they just wrote a one-size-fits-all option that has no impact. This also explains why they wrote Cora out of the story. Theoretically, Sam is only going to die for 25% of players. Bethesda wasn't going to write an entire character arc for a child dealing with the loss of their father if only a small percentage of players were going to see it. It just goes to show how little they care. They wrote 4 potential deaths, but couldn't be bothered to write 4 different outcomes, so they made sure that all of those options could be shoved into one story. This is also what I'm talking about when I say that the emissary is not Sam. The emissary's personality, dialogue, and behavior do not change depending on who dies. The emissary is some weird amalgamation of all 4 people that doesn't have any of their defining characteristics. The emissary is the same person no matter what person they end up as, and so the emissary is not Sam. The emissary is just using Sam's face for dramatic effect. This could have been so interesting. Imagine if the emissary's actions and behavior could be wildly different depending on who died. Imagine how cool it would be to do a second playthrough and realize that you only got 1 of 4 potential versions of the emissary. Imagine if who the emissary was actually changed how the story played out. But as always, Bethesda needed to make sure that everyone has the same experience, so the emissary is just some blank slate for any character to be inserted into. And man, don't even get me started on what this means for the 3 characters that survived. Not one of them is going to play an integral role in the remainder of the story because Bethesda had no way of knowing whether or not they'd be alive. So they all just hang out at HQ and let me do all the work while they pass judgment on my decision aside of the Crimson Fleet. I'm left imagining a much more interesting game where which character dies has a profound effect on how the story plays out. The emissary could embody whichever person they end up as, while the remaining characters fulfill important roles related to their capabilities. The loss of whoever died could be felt by the gap left by not having them around. Every player would end up with 1 of 4 stories, and you could experience a new story with each playthrough. God, that would be so cool! Instead, Bethesda chose the easiest and laziest route of pretending your choices matter while ensuring they don't matter enough to do anything. This was another one of those moments that really pushed me to make this video because this is utter garbage. I have no charitable interpretation for the situation. It is lazy and terrible. So after the emissary and the hunter lay out their plans, I'm asked to choose which philosophy I support. Will I assist the emissary in restricting how many people get access to the Unity, or will I use my strength to take the rocks and become Starborn? But before I make my decision, there's one last place I have to go. Earth. The emissary directs me to go there to discover something that they hope will sway my decision. But before I do that, have you ever wondered what I'm doing in the months between uploads? Well, if you are a Patreon member, you would know. Patreon subscribers get weekly updates, early access to new videos, behind-the-scenes streams, special written reviews, and more for the low price of just $5 a month. Joining the Patreon is the best way to support the channel, and it allows me to do a lot of things that make my videos better. So come on by if you want to take a peek behind the curtain. If you can't afford the Patreon but still want to support the channel, hitting the like button really does go a long way to showing YouTube that people want to see this stuff, so I appreciate that too. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the video. I headed to an old NASA launch tower and started looking around, and once again, like the ancient ship before, all of the technology and storage containers on a planet that's been abandoned for well over a century are the same as they are today. My theory that society has not advanced since leaving the Earth is now confirmed. I will not take any counter-arguments. Here in NASA's headquarters, a scientist made sure to record audio logs for no discernible reason on computers that aren't password protected and slates that she left on the bathroom counter about all the top secret discoveries she was working on, as scientists often do. Long ago, the Earth had to be abandoned due to the atmosphere slowly being stripped away. Humanity got lucky when they managed to invent faster than light travel just in time for a mass exodus from Earth. At least that's what everyone believes. The reality is more grim. An early flaw with the grav drives that powered faster than light travel caused the atmosphere to disappear. Humanity didn't invent grav drives to escape a dying Earth. They killed Earth by inventing grav drives. And the scientists that first began work on those grav drives learned how to create them and what they would do after finding a funny rock. He had a brain blast that showed him what would happen and went ahead with it anyway, entranced by the promise of life out in the stars. The Emissary wanted me to see this as a warning about the caution that must be exercised around the rocks. Despite how much they've gained by collecting them, the Starborn themselves still know little about the rocks, yet they hunt them anyway, in search of a power that they can't know the ramifications of obtaining. After learning this, I was asked to pick a side. Join the Emissary in carefully controlling the rocks and access to the Unity until we better understand them, or join the Hunter because star powers are cool and killing people is fun. I picked neither. I had him with the Miles Morales classic. I'm gonna do my own thing. It's great that this is an option. This is one of the few times I'm going to give Bethesda absolute credit with no caveats. I hate it in video games when you have to pick one of two sides when you don't really agree with either one. In this situation, whoever you side with becomes your ally while you have to fight the other one before finding the Unity. It's fantastic that you have the option to side with neither of them and make it harder for yourself because they'll ally together against you instead. I love that. Full stop. Good job, Bethesda. That's a meaningful choice with good ramifications. Before the final encounter, I needed to finish collecting the rocks. In total, there are 24 rocks with a power for each of them. Like I briefly mentioned earlier, most of the powers are combat-oriented. The problem with that is that the combat is so simple and has so little engagement that I didn't feel a need to use the combat-focused powers, so I really just stuck to the ones that help me with stealth. There's the Void Form power, which we talked about quite a bit during the stealth section, so I won't go over that again. The other power I used was the rather creatively named Sense Star Stuff. Spent a whole day workshopping that one, eh? This one let me see nearby enemies through walls, which was helpful with staying hidden from them, which I really needed since it takes no time at all for you to get caught once they spot you. One power that I thought was going to be useful was the Precognition power. This one lets you see the path enemies are going to take when they are moving, but the far more interesting thing that I wanted to use it for is the ability to see how someone will respond to a dialogue choice. I thought this would be perfect for persuasion because it would let me see whether or not a choice would succeed or fail, but that would be really cool and useful, so it doesn't work that way. Precognition is useless for persuasion, so it's useless for me. There's a good variety of powers. You can create a clone of yourself to fight for you, clone an enemy to fight for you, shoot beams of energy, control gravity in various ways, control time. I can't really speak to their utility since I didn't use any of them, but I like the spread. In order to collect all the rocks and powers, you end up traveling to a lot of planets throughout the galaxy. One of the things that makes video games extremely unique as an art form is your ability to interact with them. In TV shows or movies, you're limited to seeing what the creators show you, but with video games, you can explore the world you're in. You can walk around and discover what's around you. Exploration is a unique aspect of video games that other art forms can't really replicate. Someone can make a movie that captures the spirit of exploration, but only video games allow you to become an explorer. And a lot of games cater to that. They let you go and discover what's out there. What's down that hallway? What's up that mountain? What does exploration look like in Todd Howard's dream game? The game he's wanted to make for decades. Well, it looks like this. Sometimes it looks like this. Oh, isn't that nice? Don't you just want to run through that for half an hour trying to reach your destination? This is perhaps the biggest problem of all with Starfield. This is a game where the entire story is centered around becoming an explorer and exploring the galaxy, where the exploration really sucks. For starters, there's really nothing to motivate you to go out and explore. It's not enough for Sarah to tell you exploration is really cool and you should go do it. There should be a gameplay reason to push you out into that world. And not only that, some objective that will ask you to be aware of your surroundings. Keep your eyes and ears open and, explore. The best that Starfield has to offer is a kiosk in Constellation Basement with requests for you to find planets with certain characteristics, which is basically just asking you to explore for exploration's sake. Go land on some planet and hope it has what you're looking for. If not,
Try another! Try another! Try another! Try another!
Lots of games use mission objectives to push you out into the world. Before you can complete your objective, you have to walk around or drive around and see the world around you. If they've done a good job, your natural curiosity will lead you off the beaten path to see what else the world has to offer. Starfield has mission objectives, but since their engine doesn't allow you to fly seamlessly from the planet's surface out into space or vice versa, you end up fast traveling directly to where you want to go no matter what. You don't need to go find that bandit camp, you can land right in front of it. Half the fun of exploration is actually figuring out how to get to your objective, whatever it may be. The act of traversing can be very fun in and of itself, whether it be because of the vehicle you need to get around or the terrain you need to traverse. Figuring out how to get past a mountain in your way can lead to a really fun adventure. Piloting a spaceship could have been a really engaging traversal method that makes reaching your destination fun, but no, you just loading screens wherever you need to go, no traversal needed. Lots of games utilize random encounters throughout your travels to keep you engaged. Skyrim did this with thieves trying to steal from you, prisoners getting escorted, monsters attacking you. It makes the world feel alive. It makes it feel like you're exploring a real space that exists whether you're there or not. Sometimes you get stopped by ship captains in Starfield after you're past the loading screen. Then you can land directly where you want to go after you're past the loading screen. Once you're on the planet, any random encounters are few and far between and very forgettable. The reward you're seeking can be a very good motivator to go explore. Some really cool items that you've heard rumors about, or just the knowledge that by exploring, you'll inevitably find something useful or interesting. This is about the only thing that Starfield has going for it. Most dungeons end with a big chest with a nice weapon or spacesuit in it, but a lot like what I said before about high-level locks frequently holding garbage, it's very rare that you'll find something worth having. There are no particularly unique guns or spacesuits, you're just hoping to find one with the right parts and perks to be useful to you. Sure, it's nice finding a good piece of equipment, but it's hardly a motivator when more often than not, it's just not worth the effort. Have fun trying to hawk that expensive gun you don't need to one of the vendors carrying $14 on them. If you're into crafting things, then you can find ore to mine on every planet. This is probably the most compelling reason to go out and look around, but you don't actually need to use your eyes and explore your environment to find this stuff. Your scanner will just highlight it. Shoot your laser until it explodes and go on your merry way. This was not a good motivator for me because I've had enough of Bethesda's crafting systems for one lifetime, and actually collecting ore is not engaging at all, so that's not a good motivator ultimately. So they're relying on the journey itself to outweigh the cons of finding garbage loot, but the journey itself isn't fun either. You don't have to explore to get there, you can land where you want to go, and when you do get there, all the dungeons are just shooting galleries until you reach the end. There's rarely a puzzle to solve or a story to uncover to keep the dungeons interesting. It's just a bunch of enemies to fight in a building or cave that looks like every other building or cave in the game. And since the combat isn't particularly fun, that part of the experience isn't a good motivator either. Essentially, they're relying on you as the player to be naturally motivated to go explore, and in a space video game, that's not the worst thing ever. If the space you were exploring was interesting. Starfield has over 1,000 planets in it, but most of them are desolate wastelands with nothing to see. Maybe that's realistic, but it's not interesting. There are some very pretty planets in this game, but the flat lighting doesn't do them any favors. Not to mention that the ones that are pretty run out of things to show you quickly. The procedural generator has a limited amount of assets to work with, so as soon as you land on a planet, you've seen everything it has to offer. Every tree, every plant, every rock and animal is laid out in front of you. You won't stumble upon a river in a forest or an oasis in a desert. Lots of planets have oceans, but you'll never find a beach unless the place you land on is specifically designated as having one. How exciting! You can spend 2 minutes on a planet and feel confident that you've seen everything it has to offer. There's no reason to explore it further. Lots of games utilize procedurally generated spaces for you to explore, especially survival games, but they're generated in a way that makes them challenging to get around, while offering a variety of locations to find. It forces you to figure out where everything is, to create a mental map, to explore and figure out the world around you. As a result, you have the knowledge that you could stumble upon a beautiful vista while wandering around. In the entire time I played Starfield, I cannot name a single time that I stopped and thought, wow, that's really pretty, while walking around a planet. There are no beautiful vistas to stop and appreciate, no interesting caves to explore with the promise of some reward, and there's no challenge to getting around. The planets are remarkably flat, or at least flat enough that your boost pack can get you over inclines easily. There's no risk of falling into a canyon, no roads that lead to settlements, no gorgeous forests to wander around. There's nothing to see and very little to do. If they were relying on my natural desire to explore, then they failed to build a world that would appeal to that desire. I cannot overstate how boring it is to spend time on these planets. You made a game about becoming an explorer where exploration basically doesn't exist. What is wrong with you, Bethesda? Even the map isn't interested in mapping out the world around it. Side note, this map is unbelievably useless, to the point that I almost forgot to write about it because I never even used it. Your shitty engine barely functions as is. I don't care how useful your team is. If using it means that you spend half the game looking at a loading screen, then it's time to pivot. I know that you can't handcraft 1,000 planets. I know that you have to use a procedural generation if you want to do that. But maybe you just shouldn't do that. Maybe 10 really solid, really well-designed planets that are actually fun to explore would suffice. After you've figured that out, give players a reason to explore them. Give them stuff to do, like actual stuff to do, not scanning, mining, or killing, something engaging. Maybe then your space game about exploration would have an interesting space to explore. What you have now is bad. Just bad, no silver lining. No, Sarah, I don't want to join Constellation, and I can't say I'm surprised that none of you leave HQ. For a group of explorers, you assholes have nothing to explore. After exploring more than 3 planets to find all the rocks and powers, I finally had everything I needed to find Unity. All but one more rock. And the Emissary and the Hunter are guarding it. I made my way to the final temple, battled my way through countless nameless Starborn, and finally came face to face with my last obstacle. Before our battle, I stopped to speak with both of them, and to my surprise, I was able to persuade them to let me take the last rock without fighting. For the last time, persuasion is the absolute best skill in the game. I love that you can talk your way out of the final boss fight. That is awesome. Great job, Bethesda. Finally, I hit every rock. The Unity was waiting for me. Before setting off on my final journey, I had one last conversation with a bunch of people whose opinions mean very little to me. Then I jumped to the center of the universe. My God, I knew it. It's better than I ever could have imagined. I found myself face to face with myself, or at least some entity using my face to speak to me. They explained that by entering the Unity, I'll become a part of the universe itself. My explorer spirit will spread across the universe as I leave it behind, and I will awaken in another universe as a Starborn. Before I left, it showed me what would happen as a result of my actions throughout the game. The Crimson Fleet expands unopposed, just as planned. My courage as a Freestar Ranger by killing a criminal before giving them a fair trial inspires vigilante justice across the Freestar Collective. Good luck dealing with that. Terramorphs go bye-bye, and the remainder of Constellation publishes what they discovered. And by they, I mean I. They published what I discovered by finding the rocks and the Unity that no one besides Vlad really helped with. Glad they are able to profit off of my work. The rest of the galaxy is free to search for the Unity unopposed by the Hunter or the Emissary. And I don't know what happens to Ryujin because I didn't finish that questline on this character because it broke. So we're just gonna have to leave that one open-ended, which is better. This Where Are They Now section at the end feels very final. It wraps up every story in a nice little bow. If the intention is to create a living, breathing universe, then leaving things open-ended lends itself better to that idea. By wrapping up these stories and telling me what happens, you put an end to those events and close off the story. The book is shut, the universe is done. That's not very interesting. There was only one thing left to do. Fulfill my destiny and walk into the Unity. If there is anything that I am truly to praise this game for, it's the music and sound design. Overall, I did not enjoy Starfield. There was no part of this experience that really made me feel anything, besides frustration maybe. I didn't have fun, I didn't get excited, I didn't feel joy or sadness, just nothing. Of course, walking into the Unity is only the start of a new beginning. After this, you can continue into New Game Plus as a Starborn. Get your own fancy Starborn ship and Starborn armor, and canonically speaking, you're now in a different universe. This is a cool idea for how to do New Game Plus. I think it's the first game I've ever played that has a story explanation for New Game Plus, and I like that a lot. Unfortunately, Bethesda always has to find a way to screw it up. The promise of becoming Starborn is a really cool idea. Bethesda could design a game where there was a number of factors and variables that were different on every playthrough. Little things about how the story played out, different characters being involved in different quest lines. The Emissary being noticeably different depending on who died, and that influences how the story plays out. Maybe when you play the Crimson Fleet, there's a different captain that works on finding Crix's legacy in a different way. One universe where the recruiter wasn't framed at Ryujin and did in fact leak the information. One universe where the war criminal did get executed at the end of the war. One universe where the councilman isn't the bad guy and it's the marshal instead. One universe where Sam is an interesting character. One where Vasco doesn't exist, hopefully. Then when you start a new game, every player gets a universe with its own set of variables. I'm talking about their first playthrough, not New Game Plus. You could be talking to your friend and find out that their story played out completely differently from yours. And you wouldn't know why, but you'd know that you're having a unique experience. Then you become Starborn, and in a new universe, you get a new set of variables, an all new, if somewhat familiar story. And you'd realize that you and your friend got different universes in each of your playthroughs. You'd come to realize that you need to play through the game in multiple universes if you want to see everything. That would really incentivize going through the Unity multiple times, and it would make becoming Starborn more than just the end of the game. It would be the start of a new journey to discover all the ways the story could play out. Yeah, that would be really cool, but that's not what happens. My new universe is exactly the same as my old one. The only exception is that in this universe, my character already died. But everyone is still in Constellation, you still hunt down rocks, every vendor, every power, every quest is exactly the same. Well, let's not be unfair, it isn't always like this. When you go through Unity, which Bethesda I guess expects you to do multiple times, there is a chance you'll get a universe where Constellation isn't quite what you expect. There's one where your character is still alive and you can recruit them as a companion. One where Andrasia took over Constellation for her snake cult. One where Constellation is a bunch of children, and a few more variants. There's even one where Starborn Cora tries to exact revenge on you for what happened to her father. But all these variants only affect how you get the rocks in that universe. Sure, it's interesting that in one universe Walter has all the rocks and won't give them to you unless you buy them, but once you do, that's it. That's where the differences end. After you visit Constellation, you've seen every difference that this universe has to offer. Sure, it would be interesting to see a universe where the Earth wasn't destroyed and humanity never left for the stars, but no. Apparently, across the vast multiverse, only Constellation changes. You can jump to another universe after that, and it's exactly like your first one. So yes, technically Bethesda did make sure that 1 out of every 5 or 10 universes you go to is different, but they did it in the easiest and laziest possible way, which is beginning to feel like a theme throughout this video. I fully recognize that what I'm asking for is a lot, and that it would be extremely difficult to pull off. But I believe it's entirely possible if they were to rein in the scope of the game and build a smaller, more meaningful experience. But it's like they're incapable of diving deep into an idea. Every good idea this game has goes nowhere. As soon as you try to look beneath the surface, you find how little was actually done with it. It's pretty cool that you get a nice Starborn ship once you become Starborn, but you know what isn't nice? That every time your ship gets scanned, the stupid jackass on the radio has to spend 30 seconds commenting on how weird your ship is before scanning the damn thing!
Attention, unidentified vessel. You have no faction markings or registered manufacturer. Please maintain course while we scan you. Assuming scans even work on whatever it is you're flying.
If they'd taken 2 seconds to think about this instead of implementing it because it sounded cool, they'd see how annoying it is for players to deal with. That basic level of forethought is completely absent from this game. This entire game feels like the first draft of a much more interesting game. Every idea is half thought through, every story half written, every system half developed. Ultimately, I'm left wondering why I would bother doing another playthrough as a Starborn. I said multiple times throughout this video that this game wasn't designed to be played multiple times, and I hope you already see why. Choosing different skills doesn't change how the game plays. Making different choices doesn't change how the story plays out. There's nothing stopping you from doing every quest line in one playthrough. This entire game is designed so that you can see and do everything in a single playthrough. So why on earth would I play it again when my new universe has nothing new to offer me? The first playthrough wasn't even that fun. You think I want another one? In the first video, I brought up my experience with Skyrim. I talked about how Skyrim felt like magic to me, and how I loved it for what it did. But as I've grown older and I've played more games, I've started to see more and more flaws with Skyrim. And playing through Starfield, I realized that Starfield shares many of its flaws with Skyrim. The writing is bland, your choices don't matter, sometimes your skills get taken away if they're inconvenient, the combat is lackluster. None of these problems are as severe as they are in Starfield, but they do exist, so what changed? Why don't I like Starfield if it's so similar to Bethesda's other games? Games that I loved. Games that I still look at fondly. What about the game's reception? Mixed reviews on Steam is pretty bad for their standards. Nobody knows better than me that popular opinion is not the deciding factor of a piece of art's worth, but let's try to understand what this means. Are my standards the problem? Am I asking too much? Have we as a gaming community become too demanding for developers to keep up with? It could be. It could be that I need to go easier on Bethesda. But I want to offer a different perspective. Video games are art, and art is iterative, meaning that artists learn from one another. One artist creates a new technique, and that technique is used by other artists to create more art, to evolve that technique to the next level until eventually the original technique, which was once revolutionary, becomes normal. It becomes standard, somewhat mundane. So more techniques are created, new mediums found, new creative outlets. Cave paintings would have been revolutionary at the time they were created, but they look rather simple to our modern eyes, don't they? How many artists are now capable of replicating Van Gogh's once unique and revolutionary style? Space Invaders used to be the cutting edge of what video games can do, yet it wouldn't even pass as a full-fledged video game by today's standards. At the time of its release, Skyrim was truly revolutionary. There was no one else creating such an expansive and detailed world, and that really is something that people latched onto. The world. It's fun to explore Skyrim, to discover what's out there as you go from one objective to the next, to learn how it's all laid out, what leads where, what you'll find in the next city. The ambience. The experience of being in that world is truly special. What does Starfield have that Skyrim didn't? How did Bethesda iterate on their art to create something new and exciting? Well, they didn't. If anything, they actually regressed, because Starfield does not have Skyrim's world, or Fallout's world. The experience of being in the settled systems cannot match the experience of walking through those worlds. You can't even properly travel through this world. You can't walk from point A to point B and soak in the ambience. You will inevitably hit a wall that you need to fast travel through, and when you do, there's a good chance you'll land on some procedurally generated wasteland. The lore, the politics, the setting are also pedestrian comparatively. If anything, playing Starfield made me appreciate Skyrim more, because for every flaw that Skyrim has, there's something beautiful about it that outweighs its negatives. Starfield doesn't have that. At its most basic level, it is my standards that are the problem. When I played Skyrim, I didn't really have standards. I was akin to a toddler taking their first steps, and in doing so, every step was exciting because it was fresh and new. Since then, I've played hundreds of games across years of life. I've seen truly revolutionary ideas get iterated upon until they became mundane. I've watched new subgenres come into existence and change and evolve. My standards have changed and evolved. Yet Bethesda has stayed stagnant. They have not iterated. They have not grown. They seem to believe that they can continue to do the same thing over and over and it will keep working out. Many of the things that I am criticizing about Starfield now are things that Joseph Anderson criticized about Fallout 4 7 years ago.
It's not just that Bethesda should release themselves of the obligation to include minimal effort RPG elements, essentially do something right or don't do it at all. It's that they should also fully commit to the other side and flesh out all of those mechanics.
We, as a gaming community, as the people who appreciate games as an art form, our standards have changed. But that doesn't necessarily mean that creating a game that satisfies us becomes impossibly difficult. Skyrim came out before a lot of other revolutionary titles. It came out at a time that simply having a world as large as Skyrim's was itself impressive. But as open worlds grew larger and larger, we started to realize that having a big world wasn't enough if there wasn't much to see or do in it. So smaller, more thoughtful, more contained worlds started to become more appealing to us. If a game is going to have a gigantic world, we now expect that there's going to be things to see and do throughout all of it. Apparently Bethesda didn't get the memo. They stuck their fingers in their ears and created 1,000 procedurally generated meatballs out in space. The problem with Starfield isn't that there aren't 1,000 beautifully realized and detailed planets out there. The problem is that there isn't one of them. It's quantity over quality. Starfield has a lot of things, a lot of quests, a lot of dungeons, a lot of characters, a lot of planets. But how many of those things are worth seeing or doing? A game that has a million extremely shallow things to do may have been appealing to me if it was the first game I ever played, because I wouldn't have the experience to know what else I could have. NPCs not reacting to gunfire might not have bothered me back in 2013 when I played Skyrim, because I never would have played a game where NPCs do react. But now, I know better. The gaming community knows better. And we have, for a very long time.
And so we had to come up with some notion of what fun was. We knew it was an ad hoc definition, and it was the degrees to which the game recognizes and responded to the player's choices and actions. If I go up to a wall and shoot it, to me it feels like the wall is ignoring me. I'm getting a narcissistic injury when the world is ignoring me. So it is like, to me, I was trying to convey to the user a sense of, yes, you were making choices, yes, you were progressing, which meant the game had to acknowledge that back to you. If you shoot at a wall, there have to be decals. If you kill a bunch of Marines, the Marines have to run away from you, right? You have to have this sense of the game acknowledging and responding to the choices and actions and progressions that you've made. Otherwise, it loses any sort of impact.
In case you're not familiar, that is Gabe Newell talking about his design philosophy for Half-Life, a game that came out in 1998. And in 1998, a game world that responds to you was a revolutionary idea. This is an idea that has been iterated upon until it became mundane. It's basic video game design at this point. Yet in Starfield, NPCs don't respond to gunfire. You can hack computers that people are actively using. You can shoot up an office building and no one will say anything. You can stab a bunch of people, and as long as no one catches you, they won't react to the bodies. Your choices don't matter. Stores stay open 24 hours and store clerks never sleep. The closed store will buy your guns. 25 years after Half-Life released, Bethesda created a game that responds so poorly to your actions that you may as well be invisible. You don't exist as a part of this world until it's prepared to acknowledge you. I once had a conversation with Sarah that really caught me off guard. She wanted to talk about something that bothered her, but what she said really confused me.
It's just a list of requests, but when you read between the lines, it's obvious my absence is causing issues.
What absence? You've spent the entire game standing around in Constellation HQ. You never do anything. What absence is there to miss? Bethesda was so certain that I was going to keep Sarah around as a companion throughout this game that they wrote dialogue assuming I had, instead of writing different dialogue in case I didn't. The game responded so poorly to my actions that it actually responded to something I had not done. This game cannot and does not organically respond to your actions. It is only able to react to things Bethesda expected you to do. As I've said over and over throughout this video, Bethesda wants you to believe you're playing a game that can be played in multiple ways, yet the game is only prepared to respond in one way. So in reality, you can only play it one way if you want the true Starfield experience. If they just committed to that idea, really dug into it and created a great experience out of that, then I wouldn't have half as many problems with this game as I do. But by trying to trick you into believing the world will respond to your choices, they made the most shallow RPG experience I have ever played. Back when Fallout 4 came out, a lot of people had a problem with the voice protagonist because they felt like it limited their role-playing options. Starfield was originally supposed to have a voice protagonist, but they pivoted away from it due to this criticism. Yet they didn't fix the core issue. They removed the voice, but they didn't ensure that the lack of a voice gave a proper role-playing experience. It's like they thought the players just didn't like the voice actors, instead of listening to the actual criticism about the game lacking meaningful dialogue options. At this point, I don't really know why anyone would play Starfield. There's nothing unique or interesting or fun about it. There's nothing that it's doing that makes it stand out from the crowd. Is it the worst game I've ever played? No, far from it, but it may be the most forgettable game I've ever played. There's simply nothing special or memorable about this package. Lots of indie games have a fraction of the number of things that Starfield has, yet they're far better executed because they actually committed to doing something and did it well. You don't have to create the biggest, most in-depth game ever to make a fun game these days. You just need to do what you do well. Starfield is a $70 game, and a price point like that sets expectations. By charging that much for their game, Bethesda is implying that Starfield is on par with God of War Ragnarok, Tears of the Kingdom, Dragon's Dogma 2, Forspoken. By charging that much, Bethesda is implying that Starfield is a better value than Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring, Cyberpunk 2077. If Starfield was a $30 game, these problems wouldn't magically disappear, but it's much more acceptable when the developer is honest with you about the value of their game. For $70, I expect the pinnacle of what modern gaming can provide, and this doesn't even come close to that bar. I'm not trying to make you feel bad if you enjoyed Starfield. There's nothing wrong with liking it. If it works for you, then I'm happy. My opinion is only as valuable as you deem it to be. This is just the conclusion that I came to based on all the reasons that I've laid out throughout this video. Inevitably, I'm going to get comments telling me that I would like the game more if I didn't think about it so much. If I just shut my brain off and played it, I'd like it. But first of all, the game has to be fun for that to work, and it just isn't. But also, the people that leave comments like that tend to only see the negative aspects of being so critical. Yes, as a result of having such high standards, it can be hard for me to find games that I truly enjoy. But the thing is, the more you evaluate art, the more you learn about it and examine it, the more beauty you find in it. The more you can break down and understand why something is so great, the more fully you're able to appreciate it. So no, I can't enjoy Starfield because I look at it too critically. But I can enjoy Cyberpunk on a much deeper and more intimate level than I ever could Skyrim because I'm better equipped to appreciate why it's so amazing. That's the other side of looking so deep at everything. I can see so much more clearly now than I could when I first played Skyrim, and that clarity makes all those details more beautiful than ever before. Emil Pagliarulo, yes, that's how it's pronounced, the design director for Starfield, posted a somewhat embarrassing tweet about how people who don't know what it takes to make a game like Starfield shouldn't comment on it. A lot of people took it to mean that he believes you can't criticize video games until you made one yourself. But that's because most people only saw the first tweet out of a 15-tweet thread, a tweet which was very poorly worded and out of touch. The greater message of this thread, however, is one about appreciating the work that goes into making games. It's about how no one sets out to make a bad game. It's about the concessions that need to be made over a game's development. He makes some good points about how we approach criticism on the internet. Even as a small YouTuber, I've gotten plenty of disconnected comments criticizing my work from the perspective of someone that understands nothing about what I do. And criticism like that is not even remotely helpful. So I get it. And I'll concede that many of my assumptions about the decision making for this game are just that, assumptions. I can't know whether or not Bethesda was trying to trick players into thinking they got a different game than we did. I can shit all over the procedurally generated planets, but they undoubtedly took countless hours to come to fruition. So thank you, Emil, for trying to create a great game. Thank you to the artists that brought Aquila City to life, to the voice actors for doing their best with this goofy script, to the writers for trying to do something interesting, to the composers for this wonderful soundtrack, to the programmers and designers that tried to bring this world to life. I understand better than most the struggle of creating a creative work, and I don't want to diminish the work of some truly creative people. But frankly, Bethesda has been receiving the same criticism I'm giving them now for years, and they still decided to put their energy elsewhere. They became complacent and continue to replicate the same format that got tired a while ago. My only hope is that this time, they'll listen to the criticism. If not from me, then from someone, and put their energy to better use for their next game. Instead of making a 70-hour game that is so safe, so risk-averse that it can't do anything interesting, maybe take a leap of faith on the next game. Show us the heights of your creativity. Show us what happens when you really try something new. Show us what happens when you iterate, grow, and evolve. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe leave a comment letting me know what you thought, or leave a like if you're feeling generous. I want to give a massive thanks in general to everybody for watching and enjoying the Starfield videos. You know, I built most of my audience talking about anime. I wasn't really sure how many people would watch these videos or if people would be pissed that I was talking about video games. So I really appreciate the support, and it makes me really happy that people enjoyed these videos because I had a lot of fun making them. You might be wondering if I'm going to play the Shattered Space DLC or if I'm going to make a video talking about it. The answer right now is that I don't know. I have a lot of work to do before the end of the month in order to get a video out at the beginning of next month. And then in October, I have some overseas travels planned. So I'm not even going to be able to sit down and play it until probably November. And by then, you know, depending on the content of the DLC, I don't know if I want to make a video about it. So we'll see what happens. It's a big maybe right now. If you want to find out for sure, you could join the Patreon where I post weekly updates about what I'm working on. You also get early access to new videos, behind the scenes live streams, and much more. I want to give a massive shout out to all of my Patreon members, all of whom make it much easier to do what I do here. I want to especially thank all of my gamers, Grant Harsh, Ike Deaky, and Lucy Ray Gear, and the unmatched power of the sun, whose name I definitely did not forget to say when I was recording this. And all of my simps, A Yellow Line, Marzak the Mad, Belgara, Bill Nye the Bounty Guy, David D, Degenerate, Matsugen, Jimmy B, Skippy, Ninja Des, Remu Nerd, and Ryan Hosford. Thank you all so much for the support. I really appreciate it. Thank you once again for watching the video. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you in the next one.